All right, Josh, this has always been one of my favorite topics. We touched on it a little bit before. It's about influencers. Sometimes they come in a second, sometimes they come in a lifetime. I generally share when I speak about my grandfather, who was from Kyiv, Ukraine, and my grandmother too, and my mom, and they came to Canada. And when I was about five or so, he would take me for walks in the park. And one day I asked him, I called him Zeta, how do you know all these people? I think I got my talking so much, I think came from him, by the way, but that's another conversation. But he said, he said one day I smiled at that guy and he came over and then smiled at me. And then another person saw us smiling and talking, laughing, and came over to us. And I'm thinking as a 5-year-old, wow, it's pretty easy. You just smile at people. And and as you get older, I realized that is a major way, just as easy as that, to influence people with a smile. There's other ways too. We all have different influencers in our life, but can you share maybe two or three people that have been influential in your life?
Yeah, the first one that comes to my mind is my dad. Um, like you, I have a story. Around about 2 years ago, I was really, really stressed out because of a tennis match, and I got really angry and I took it home, and I was kind of in a pissy mood around my family. And he took me aside, and this is probably the greatest lesson I've ever learned from him. He was like, "Listen, Josh, I worry about what happens at work, and when I come home, I leave that stuff at work." You can probably guess the word he used instead of stuff, but um,
Yes. Yeah.
no, he uh, he told me, at the end of the day, everybody has their problems, right? But it matters for you to step up and kind of that taught me like the first lesson of manhood was just to be kind of like the cornerstone of a community that you have. And even though I was 17, 16 years old, I took it that way, and maybe he didn't, but I took it that way, and that's something that he taught me. And he's just been a really big pusher for me. He grew up in a farm in New Zealand.
Hmm.
Um, you know, he was on government aid for a very very long time, and he was lucky enough to get a law degree and be a lawyer now. And it's been an extremely interesting story about him, and that's another story for another time. But he's just been like my biggest rock and my biggest supporter. Another person I think is probably my grandma. She grew up in a war-torn Korea during the Korean Civil War. So she told me stories about how she grew up, and um, it gives me a sense of gratefulness for the things I have now.
Hmm.
Um, I'm lucky enough to have a roof over my head and food on the table every night, and we don't really take those things and really think we're really grateful because she would tell me the stories about she would go for a couple days without eating, always moving because I don't know if you know the history of Korean War. It fluctuated so much. She would be moving all over the place, and hearing her story about how she actually ended up in America. She moved to England and then back to Korea, then to New York City, then to England and back to New York City. I mean, all of that while also her husband left her when she was trying to raise a family. So I mean, my grandma is another one of my really big inspirations, and they've taught me just to be grateful for the little things you have in your life that actually make quite a lot of difference.
Yeah, she's an amazing woman. For all that, without even knowing her, I can tell. Anybody else you want to share about?
Yeah, those are the two personal ones I have, and then obviously, somebody that I really do aspire to is Novak Djokovic. I mean, that's somebody that I really appreciate because he is one hard worker, and I think something that always pops up on his foundation that I really resonate to is being a doer. You know, he says we are a community of doers. And I think that's something that hopefully I can do one day is become a doer, talk about it, but also do it.
I think you're starting off pretty well. Did you say there was another one, or is that
That's all, those three.
those are three pretty amazing ones? Really appreciate you sharing that, and I think they did a good job in leaving their mark on you too. So way to go.
Yep. Thank you.